In regards to COVID-19 emergency procedures and the administration of oaths via remote audio-video communication, this deposition of Ricky Rivera is being conducted remotely via Zoom. Today's date is June 21st, 2021. The time is approximately 10:30 a.m. Mr. Rivera, in what city are you located?
Suwannee County, Florida.
Thank you. The witness is located in Suwannee County, Florida. My name is Sylvia Evans. I'm located in Miami, Florida. I'm administering the oath and reporting this deposition remotely. May I see your ID, please?
Yeah, give me a second, hold on. Do you see it there?
Hold it back a little bit. Too close. Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, would counsel please state your appearance for the record and express your stipulation that the deposition and oath may take place remotely?
Dr. James Eric McDonough, the pro se plaintiff, and I agree with the stipulation.
Excuse me, Sam Zeskind of Weiss Sirota Healthman for the defendant, City of Homestead, and the witness. We stipulate to the deposition and the oath being conducted remotely.
Thank you. Raise your right hand, Mr. Rivera. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Ready.
Okay. Before we get started, Mr. Zeskind, everyone here is sharing their video. Would you be interested in sharing your video as well, sir?
I will keep my video off, thank you.
Okay. Good morning, Detective Rivera. Detective Rivera, at our last deposition, you refused to answer questions I asked trying to determine if there were additional responsive records which had not been produced. Due to this, I filed a motion to compel, and that's why you're being redeposed today, sir. It's expected that you will answer all questions or claim a proper privilege. Do you understand this, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'd like to pick up where we left off. Please understand that I'm trying to obtain documents that I believe exist and have not been produced to me. For the purpose, the letter you acknowledge that you signed and sent clearly said that Homestead Police Department was conducting a criminal investigation into me, and that letter was sent to a federal law enforcement officer. So far, the only documents responsive to my request have been emails between you, Detective Tom Meade, and Special Agent Greg Seven, discussing a criminal investigation into me, as well as a background report. I find it difficult to believe that no one prepared an official report of any kind. So, Detective Rivera, did you prepare any report or document regarding the criminal investigation referenced in the letter that you acknowledged sending to Special Agent 7?
Object to form.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, sir.
No.
No, okay. Do you know if Tom Meade or anyone else prepared any reports or documents of any kind related to the letter and the emails to Special Agent 7?
Object to form.
I don't know.
You don't know. So you can't say yes or no? You have no knowledge of it, though. Is that correct?
I don't recall.
Okay. So it's your testimony here today, Detective Rivera, that there was no official report which detailed any alleged criminal activity for which I was being investigated?
Not to my knowledge.
And so it's your testimony here today that there's no document having some type of tracking or case number generated from the criminal investigation which was conducted on me?
No, sir. I have no knowledge.
Okay. I'm going to go back through the questions that were certified at the last deposition and re-ask those to you, and I would hope that you would answer them. The first one is, if you were doing an investigation on me, is there a reason that it wouldn't be in the records management system?
Objection, and you need to ask only if there's records that exist that weren't put into the system, not questions regarding how the investigation was conducted or why things were not placed in the system. The scope of this deposition is limited to timing of responses and whether additional records exist. That's pursuant to the
I
court's
understand that, Mr.
17,
Zeskine. This
2020
is
order.
related to whether records exist that haven't been produced, and it's reasonably calculated to lead to discoverable of admissible evidence.
The standard for this deposition is what's set forth in the order, and that's limited to the timing of the
that's
city's
limited to
responses
time
and whether
of
there
response.
exist any additional records.
I understand, Mr. Zeskine. This question is related to me trying to determine if there's additional records that exist that have not been produced.
So ask him that.
So, if you were doing an investigation on me, is there a reason that it wouldn't be in the records management system?
Same objection.
You can answer the question, Mr. Rivera.
No, there's no reason.
No reason. Okay. Next one. According to documents I have been provided, I was under criminal investigation. Would it be the policy and practice of the department to complete an offense incident report identifying the crime along with the location and other pertinent information as required by the state?
Objection to form, and same objection regarding the scope of the deposition. We're not here to talk about the city's policies and practices in terms of how depositions are conducted.
I appreciate your objection, Mr. Zeskine. Mr. Rivera, please answer the question.
Could you repeat it again, please?
Yes, sir. According to documents I have been provided, I was under criminal investigation. Would it be the policy and practice of the department to complete an offense incident report identifying the crime along with the location and other pertinent information as required by the state?
Same objections.
I still don't understand the question. What are you trying to get out of it? I don't understand.
If a criminal investigation is being conducted, is it the policy of the department to complete some offense incident report or some other type of report that identifies the crime that I'm being suspected of?
Same objection.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. You were being overspoken?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Okay. Can you tell me, did anyone assign you to work on this investigation?
Objection to form, and now we're getting way outside of
No, we're not getting
the scope
outside.
of what's allowable
No, we're
here.
not getting outside, because if he was instructed by someone else to do this investigation, if it was through an email, text, or other means, it would be a public record that would be responsive to my request, which has not been produced. This question is clearly calculated to lead to discoverable, admissible evidence. Mr. Zeskine, I would appreciate if you would just state your objection and let the witness answer the question.
No, he won't be answering questions regarding how the investigation began, how it was conducted. He's here to answer questions about whether there are records. If you want to ask him whether there are records that exist related to that, maybe you can get into that. But in terms of asking him that question, how the investigation began, that's relating to your Southern District litigation.
Sir, you don't get to ask the questions. I get to ask the questions. If he answers that question, then we follow up to how that was done and we determine if there's records. So, Mr. Rivera, did anyone assign you to work on this investigation into me?
Objection. It's outside the scope of what's allowable.
It is not outside the scope, and your
this
objection is
case.
noted. Mr. Rivera, please
And it
answer
goes
the
to the
question.
Southern District litigation. He's not answering that question.
You're instructing the witness to not answer this question.
It's outside the scope of what the court's allowed, and you're getting into
It is not outside
questions
the
that
scope,
are
sir.
relevant only to your Southern District litigation.
Okay, let me rephrase this. Miss Detective Rivera, if you were assigned to investigate me, did this come through you through any type of document or electronic communication which would have been a public record?
Objection to form.
Don't recall.
You don't recall why you were investigating me?
I don't recall the question that you're asking me, the actual answer. Who told me to do what? I don't recall.
How would you have been instructed to do this? Would it have been through a phone call? Would it have been verbally? Would it have been through a text message, an email? Would it have been a memorandum sent in our office? How would you get assigned a case to investigate? How would you get assigned to investigate this case?
Objection to form and objection outside the scope of what's allowable in this deposition. It's not asking about whether there are any additional public records that are responsive to your request. It's not asking about the timing of the responses. You're only right now inquiring into issues that are relevant to the Southern District litigation, which is not been permitted by the court.
No, sir, that is not correct. I'm trying, if he was instructed to investigate me and it was anything other than verbal in person, most likely there would be a responsive record. I'm trying to determine if there's a responsive record have not been produced to me. So again, I will ask my question. Detective Rivera, when you are typically get assigned to do an investigations, how does that assignment come to you?
Objection. Same objection.
You can answer the
You're
question.
asking now. You're asking him to discuss the general practice in terms of how cases are assigned to him. That's not related in any way to the timing of the responses to your public records requests or whether or not there are additional records that exist. He's not answering these particular questions.
Let me rephrase this. Mr. Rivera, assuming that someone assigned you to investigate me, did that assignment come through a channel which would produce a public record?
Objection to form. Calls for speculation.
I don't recall.
Are there many different ways that you get assigned cases, or sometimes it's verbally and sometimes it's electronically? How does this normally happen?
Objection to form. That question's already been asked. It's outside the scope.
He's not answering my question. I'm trying to determine if there's responsive records. Mr. Zeskine, you didn't seem to be doing very good with Judge Asharte last time. Would you like us to call him and we can ask him this and see if he thinks the question should be answered or not?
Not my call.
Okay, let's move along. The next question you certified. What crime are you investigating me for, or were you investigating me for?
Objection. Outside the scope of what's been allowed for this deposition. It's not related to the timing of the city's responses to your requests, and it doesn't relate to whether or not there are any additional public records responsive to your request. That question's not being answered. That only relates to the Southern District litigation.
Okay. Detective Rivera, is there any record anywhere that would detail what criminal activity I was suspected of?
Not aware of anything.
You're not aware of anything?
That's correct.
Okay. Was Chief Roll aware of this investigation?
Objection. Same objection as before. No. Not limited to the timing of the city's responses. Not limited to whether there are any additional records responsive to your request. That question's not being answered. It's relevant.
The entire deposition, sir. This is absolutely related to it. Chief, I was instructed or advised that Chief Roll was taking a copy of this investigation around to members of council, telling them that I was twice Baker acted and a bomb maker in a menace to society that needed to be removed for their safety. If Chief Roll was aware of this and how he would have gotten the document is absolutely related to whether there's additional records which have not been produced. So I will ask the question again, Mr. Rivera, and I would like for you to answer it. Was Chief Roll aware of this investigation?
Same objection. It doesn't relate to whether or not there are any additional public records. It relates only to you have a claim. You have a claim against Chief Roll in the Southern District related to this investigation.
That is irrelevant.
That's what you're. I agree it's irrelevant to this case, so it's not being answered.
It's irrelevant to what I'm doing here. The public records request that's the subject of this lawsuit goes to the investigation, which is also subject to the lawsuit in the Southern District. I get that. These questions are going to dovetail and overlap. Just because you think that, sir, does not make it right. Okay. Detective Rivera, did you provide a copy of your report to Chief Roll?
Don't recall.
Did Chief Roll ever message you electronically in any way, shape, or form, or provide you any written documents related to your criminal investigation on me?
Don't recall.
Okay, another one that you certified. In other words, if you had looked into my wife, it would have been part of your investigation into me if you did it at the same time you were investigating me. Would that be an accurate statement to make?
No, sir.
No, sir. Did you investigate my wife as part of your investigation into me?
No, sir.
Are you sure about that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. I'll get back to my regular list here. So, the last deposition, Detective Rivera, I had you look at a page of a report that you had generated. I want to look at this report again. Today I have the full report, and this is Exhibit 1. Let me see if I can find this, and I will get this shared on the screen. Give me just a second. Can you see this, sir?
Yes, sir.
Is this an official police report?
No, sir.
Is this a report for a criminal investigation?
No, sir.
I want to scroll through this report and we'll ask some more questions. And if we go through it, if you see anything that you believe details the alleged criminal conduct I was being investigated for, could you point that out? Would you be able to?
Objection. That's not in any way directed to the timing of the city's responses or whether or not
Okay.
there are any
All right.
additional public records
I withdraw. I'll withdraw.
responsive to the request.
Detective Rivera, was this report ever entered into the RMS system?
No, sir.
But this report is a public record, correct?
Objection. Calls for a legal conclusion.
Do you know where this report was stored at, sir?
Yes.
Where was it stored?
In my office.
Could you be a little more elaborate? Or
On
is it-
a file cabinet in my office.
This was on a file cabinet in your office. This wasn't stored electronically anywhere?
Not that I'm aware. No.
Okay. So you can see here, this starts with section 1. It just says my name and my alias, and you can see it has my date of birth, social security number, address, education. Then it goes through publication list. I'm just going to scroll through this. We don't need to read all my publications. I'll note that the majority of these are not actually my publications, though, and half my publications are not listed on here. Okay. We're down to section 2 now. This is criminal record. So I've redacted a couple of these. The C and the D, those were the last 2 arrests that I suffered by Homestead Police Department in 2016. Is that why you were investigating me, sir?
Objection. Not limited to the timing of the responses or whether there are any additional public records, and goes to the genesis of the investigation, which is relevant to the Southern District, so you won't be answering that question.
Okay. I want to show another exhibit real quick, and we'll call this Exhibit 2. Do you see this document, Detective Rivera?
Yes, sir.
Okay, this is a no action memo from the state attorney's office. And you can see where I've highlighted here, that's the tampering with a victim and stalking. Those are the charges for my arrest from September 1st, 2016. Now, I have the filing decision here. We don't really need to go through that, but what I think is important are these 2 dates down at the bottom. You agree one date is 9/29/16 and one date is 10/27/16. Would you agree with that?
Yes. I see the dates.
Okay. Now go all the way to the bottom. We'll scroll to the bottom. There's nothing else. I'll scroll back to the top. There's some initials and another date. That's 10/28/16. You agree that's correct, sir?
Right.
Okay, so we agree that this document is available at least by 10/28/16. And this is the no action memo where the charges for the last arrest were dismissed against me. At the last deposition, you commented that you could investigate me if the criminal charges were still pending, but clearly these criminal charges were closed. Did you have any other reasons that you were able to investigate me for?
Objection, that's not limited to the timing of the response to your public records request or whether any additional records exist, and only relate to the reason why you were being investigated, which is the subject of your claim pending in the Southern District of Florida, so he will not be answering that question.
Okay. So I'm going to scroll back for a second. With this, let me stop sharing this for a second. Let me open the report back up. Okay, again, this is Exhibit 1. This is the report. Detective Rivera, was this report or any of these records turned over to the police records department for storage as part of the city's official records?
Not that I'm aware.
Okay. So we'll continue scrolling down this document. We have Section 3, Financial Information Reference Residence. That's not related to any criminal conduct, correct?
That's correct.
And Section 4, Business Affiliations. This references some business here. That wouldn't be related to any criminal conduct, correct?
That's correct.
And I just want to note, none of these businesses do I have any relation to. Section number 5 is my employer. Nothing of that would be related to criminal conduct. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And section number 6, lawsuits filed by James Eric McDonough. This wouldn't relate to criminal conduct, would it?
That's correct.
That's correct. Now, with the timing of the responding to this request and another request, I'm not sure, were you aware that Manager Gretzis had told the media and had stated at council meetings that he had a list of lawsuits that I had filed?
Objection to form, and also objects because it's outside the scope of what's been allowed. It doesn't relate to the timing of the responses or whether any additional public records exist, and it's outside the scope of the order. You won't be answering.
You agree this is a list of lawsuits, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Here's interesting. Section 7. Could you read what Section 7 says? What I have highlighted there, sir?
Objection. Even this is outside the scope.
No, it is not, Mr. Zesk.
Of the order. It doesn't. Asking him to read what's in the report doesn't relate in any way to the timing of the response or whether there are additional records.
All right, let's do this another way. Section 7. James Eric McDonough, spouse. Vanessa Lynn McDonough. And then it has her date of birth, social security number, address, driver's license number, her employer, her email contact, and that she has no criminal record. Would you like to change your earlier statement that you didn't look into my wife as part of your investigation into me, sir?
You asked me if I investigated your wife before. I didn't investigate your wife.
How did you get this information if you didn't investigate my wife?
Objection. Now we're continuing to go outside the scope of the timing of the responses and whether there are additional records. So we won't be answering those questions.
Okay. The last line in Section 7, I highlighted. It says, see clear report for further information on Vanessa Lynn McDonough. Could you tell me what a clear report is, sir?
Clear report is a report that basically gives information on a person that is run through that system.
Okay. Let me stop sharing this for a second and let me bring up another exhibit. We will call this Exhibit 3. Let me just get this shared here. Okay, can you see this document I have up here, sir?
Yes, sir.
Is this part of the clear report?
Objection to form.
Without looking at any other pages, it looks like it could be part of it, but
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I'll slowly scroll through so you can see some more of it. And I grant it, this is not the full report. This is just part of it. Like you can see, it's page 8 of 89. We just scrolled past. But this would be part of the clear report.
Objection to form.
I guess it will be part of the clear report.
Okay. So I'll stop sharing this for a second and we'll go back to the other exhibit. So again, at the bottom, it says, see clear report for further information on Vanessa Lynn McDonough. So you agree that there is a clear report that's associated with the report that we're looking at, correct?
Objection to form.
Yes, it will be part of that report.
Okay. Did you generate the clear report, sir?
I don't recall.
So you wouldn't know who would have generated it?
Like I said, I don't recall if I generated it or somebody else generated it.
And where is the copy of this clear report stored?
This report should be, it was in my office.
Would it have been in the records management system?
No, sir.
No, sir. Okay. And I'll just finish scrolling through this document. We get to section 8, public records requests. Anything criminal conduct about me filing public records request?
No, sir.
Objection to form.
Okay. 9, Baker Act incident with Dr. Ernesto Rodriguez and James Eric McDonough. This is from 2012, so this wouldn't have been part of any criminal conduct you've been investigating me for?
Objection outside the scope of what's allowed by the order, not limited to timing, not limited to whether additional records exist.
Okay. Section 10, Homestead Police Department, contacts and events with James Eric McDonough. Let's see, we got events 2012, 2012, 2012, 12, 2012, 13, 13, 14, 13, 14, 14, and then we have 3 things from 2016, which would have been me being arrested in August, me being arrested in September, and then me getting a false restraining order again in September. Any criminal conduct outside of those 3 things that I would have been being investigated for that you're aware of?
Same objection outside the scope of the order.
Document showing that?
Not aware.
Not aware. Okay. Section 11, James Eric McDonough interview by Florida Department of Law Enforcement. That wouldn't have involved any criminal conduct that you would have been investigating me for?
Same objection outside the scope of the order.
Letter from James Eric McDonough to Miami-Dade Police Department Director J.D. Patterson. That wouldn't have been any criminal conduct you've been investigating me for?
Same objection outside the scope of the order.
13, Miami-Dade Police Department Internal Affairs report to James Eric McDonough. Would that have been any criminal conduct you've been investigating me for?
Same objection outside the scope of the order.
Last, 14, flash drive containing all James Eric McDonough Leo Affairs posting YouTube videos and other important videos. Was there any criminal conduct you were investigating me for, or any records related to any criminal conduct you would have been investigating me for related to these videos or postings?
Objection to form, other than the part of the question related to records. It's outside the scope of the order.
Let me make this easier for you. We've gone through all the sections. You didn't see any section that relates to any criminal conduct, correct?
Objection to form and objection outside the scope
I'm
of
trying
the
to find
order.
out. So, are there any, since we see there's no criminal conduct you've been investigating me for in this report, is there any other document that would detail any criminal activity that you suspected me of?
Not that I'm aware, no.
Okay, so we believe that that report and whatever attachments are with that would have been everything in your investigation of me.
That's correct.
Okay. And you agree that that clear report is part of the report that you wrote and part of the investigation into me?
Objection to form.
I believe it was part of your information.
Okay. Counselor, I would just like to note for you right now, this is a document that the city has not produced to me that we have admitted exists. If your clients can get that to me ASAP, along with any other remaining responsive documents that are outstanding, I greatly appreciate it, sir.
Which record are you referring to?
The clear report for my wife. But that is clearly a document that we have now determined exists that I have not been produced, which I will say was unlawfully withheld by the city at this point. Detective Rivera, at the last deposition, you stated that you were investigating me because I had been arrested and because I had sued the city. The charges for my arrest had been dropped before you wrote the letter to Greg Seven stating you were conducting a criminal investigation. Therefore, other than the fact that I was suing the city, was there any reason that you were investigating me that you're aware of? And would there be documents that would show this?
Objection to form, objection outside the scope of the deposition allowed by the order, other than the question regarding whether there are any additional documents.
Do you have no
Okay,
reason?
you can answer.
You have no reason to have investigated me other than I filed a lawsuit, Detective Rivera. Is that correct?
Objection outside the scope of what's allowed by the order. You won't be answering.
No, it's not
that
outside. I'm trying to determine if there's other records that are responsive. We've already found at least one, sir. Please let your witness answer the question.
You asked him what the reason was for the investigation, which is outside the scope of the order. You didn't ask him if there are any other documents.
The reason for the investigation could lead to the discovery of other records which have not been produced. That's why this is proper for me to probe this. Is there anything outside of me filing a lawsuit against the city is a reason for why you were investigating me?
Objection outside the scope of the order. You won't be
and if there
answering
was,
that.
would there be a record responsive to show this?
Objection to the portion of the question relating to what was being investigated outside the scope of what's allowable by the order. And answer the part of the question relating to whether there are other documents, if you can.
Are there any documents or records that you're aware of, Mr. Rivera, that would show that you were investigating me for any reason other than the fact that I had sued the city of Homestead, your employer?
Objection to form.
No, I'm not aware.
Okay. So you agree that you were investigating me because I sued the city?
Objection, that's not what the witness just testified to.
Well, can you provide any other reason if that's not the sole reason?
Objection outside the scope of the order. Want to get into the reasons for the investigation that's relevant in the Southern District. It's outside the scope of the order and what's allowable in this deposition.
Is it common for Homestead police detectives to investigate citizens who sue the city of Homestead?
Objection outside the scope of the order. He's not answering that.
Have you ever investigated anyone else because they sued the city, or just me?
Objection outside the scope of the order. He's not answering that.
Detective Rivera, other than the mention in the report that I showed as Exhibit 1, in the clear report on my wife, are you aware of any other public records that relate to the investigation on my wife? Or anything that relate to my wife and your investigation on me?
Objection to form.
Not aware.
Okay. And you wouldn't know why Homestead's refused to produce these documents, would you?
Objection to form.
I'm not aware.
Do you think it possibly because the records weren't properly stored?
Objection to form.
I don't know.
And if the records weren't properly stored, so I haven't been produced all the records, which we've already established at this point, could there be other records that I'm not aware of or I haven't thought of that would be responsive that haven't been produced to me that you can think of?
Objection to form.
No, I don't know.
Okay. Detective Rivera, in that report, you have mine and my wife's driver's license number and social security number. Did you run either of us on David NCIC or FCIC?
Objection outside the scope of the order. He's not answering that.
No, it's not. If you ran us on David NCIC or FCIC, that would be a record and that would be related and responsive to my request. Detective Rivera, did you run me or my wife on David NCIC, FCIC, or any other law enforcement database?
I don't recall.
Objection outside the scope of the order.
Do you know how you were able to obtain mine and my wife's personally identifiable information?
Objection outside the scope of the order. He's not answering.
The report that appears to be generated from a Word document has mine and my wife's personally identifiable information. That information came from somewhere. I would expect there would be a public record that had those on there. So, did you run me or my wife on any law enforcement database as part of your investigation into me, sir?
I don't recall.
Okay. Do you recall how you would have obtained mine and my wife's personally identifiable information?
Objection outside the scope of the order.
No, I don't recall.
Would you have obtained that information in the clear report? Would that be in the clear report? I'm not really know what a clear report is and what it all entails.
Objection outside the scope of the order.
It's not outside the scope of the order. I'm trying to find out where he found my personally identifiable information. If it all came from the clear reports, that makes sense. If it didn't all come from the clear reports, I want to know what record, where it came from. Do you believe that it came from the clear reports, sir?
Possibility.
So it could have come from the clear report. Okay. And were you only able to retrieve mine and my wife's personally identifiable information due to your position as a police officer, or is there some other reason, some other authority that you have to gather people's personally identifiable information? And before you object, Mr. Zeskind, this is relevant because I'm trying to figure out if there's any other documents related to how he got our PII.
Objection outside the scope of the order. He's not answering the authority under which he got it.
Okay. I can't find anything in any records. So, Mr. Rivera, can you tell me what criminal activity I was suspected of, which would have validated the use of police resources?
Objection outside the scope of the order. He's not answering that.
Okay. All right. Let's move along here. We'll bring up Exhibit 4 now. And let me share this. Do you see this document, Mr. Rivera?
Yes.
In the last deposition, we established that this document was provided to you by Special Agent Greg Seven. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And other than this report, did you receive any other documents from Special Agent Seven?
No, not that I'm aware. I don't recall, to be honest.
Okay. Because when I looked through the emails between you and him, he stated that he had gone through my entire personnel file, my entire government laptop, my entire internet history, and my entire email history, and they had a document he wanted to show you, which I'm assuming is this, and he also said that he would have a full report for you later. Did he ever provide you with a report?
No, sir.
Objection to form.
No, sir. And if I file a FOIA to the federal government, would I get the same answer from them?
Objection to form. Calls for speculation.
Okay. Detective Rivera, if we look at this document, can you see the column on the left that says FTK case report?
Yes.
Do you know what FTK stands for?
No, sir.
It stands for Forensic Toolkit. What's really interesting about this is when Special Agent 7 was searching my computer and everything, he was using the FTK as a tool to do the search, and it shows us what his search terms were. So I want to go down here. Do you see these search terms, sir? And can you read those for the record?
Objection outside the scope of the order. It's not related to the timing of the city's responses or whether additional records
it
exist.
absolutely is related to whether additional records are responsive, counselor. Can you see those search terms?
Yes, I can see them.
Okay, let me read them or will you read them or would you like me to read them?
You can read them if you want.
Okay. Alejandro Merguido. That's a Homestead police officer, correct?
Yes, sir.
Arrest, assault, attack, bomb, chlorine. Sir, do you know that chlorine is a chemical warfare agent?
Objection outside the scope of the
Okay.
order.
Danger, deputy, destroy, Detective Rodriguez, Detective Webster, explosive, exposure, home address, Homestead PD, Homestead Police Department, kill, Luis Gomez, Miami-Dade Police Department, phone number, police, police officer, reaction, sheriff, sovereign citizen, stalk, taboon, threat, trespass, weapon, right. And Wright is W-R-I-G-H-T. Would you agree that Wright is also a Homestead police officer?
Yes.
Okay. Are these search terms familiar to you, sir?
Some of them are yes.
Did Special Agent 7 ever request you to provide him search terms?
I believe so, yes.
Did you provide those search terms to Special Agent Greg 7?
Not all of them.
When you provided search terms to Special Agent Greg 7, how did you provide those search terms?
I believe it was via phone.
You gave him all those search terms verbally?
I didn't give them all.
Objection to form.
Oh, I'm sorry, what was that?
I did not provide all those search terms.
Okay. But the search terms you gave to him, you gave him verbally over the phone?
Yes.
Okay. Counselor, I'd like to note on the record that if Mr. Rivera had phone conversations with Special Agent Greg 7 about this investigation, those phone logs would be responsive to my investigation and have not been produced. That's at least a second set of records we've now established have not been produced by the City of Homestead. And if you could get those to me immediately, I would appreciate it. The search term taboon. Did you provide that search term?
Objection outside the scope of the order.
No, sir.
No, sir. Do you know what taboon is?
No, sir.
Oh, it's a nerve gas. It's a chemical warfare agent. It's a weapon of mass destruction. I'm just curious as to why the special agent would be searching for chemical warfare agents on my government computer.
Objection outside the scope of the order.
That's nice. Another term here, sovereign citizen. Are you familiar with that term? Did you provide that?
Objection outside the scope of the order.
Don't recall.
You don't recall if you provided the search term sovereign citizen to Greg 7?
That's correct. I don't recall.
Throughout your investigation, did you ever see or come across any documents that describe me as a sovereign citizen?
Don't recall.
Did you ever look on the internet for sovereign citizen?
I don't recall.
Okay. Has anybody at Homestead Police ever told you verbally or in writing or provided you any documentation or otherwise that I was a sovereign citizen?
Objection to form outside the scope of the order also.
The search terms that you provided to Mr. 7, how did you come up with those terms, sir?
Objection outside the scope of the order.
No, it's not. Did you come up with them on your own, or were they provided to you?
Objection to form.
Yeah, and I'm going to certify that question.
So did anybody provide you search terms to give to Special Agent Greg 7?
Don't recall.
Don't recall. Okay. Do you know, well, and are you sure that you never put any search terms in writing?
I don't recall.
Did you ever have text messages with Special Agent Greg 7?
Don't recall.
Did Special Agent Greg 7 ever text you his nephew's social security number so you could look up information for his nephew who was arrested in Miami-Dade?
Objection outside the scope of the order.
No, it's not.
How is anything related to Special Agent 7's
anything that Special
nephew?
Agent Greg 7 gave to Mr. Rivera during the course of the investigation would be related and responsive to my request, and I have not been provided it.
You believe that information related to Agent 7's nephew is related to your an investigation into you?
He intertwined these two issues in the records. I can't help that, counselor. That's his fault and problem, not mine.
The objection stands outside the scope of
Okay,
the order.
well, I just want to note that the witness cannot recall if he sent text messages to Special Agent 7. The emails seem to confirm that there were text messages. No text messages have ever been produced to me. So this is now at least a third set of documents that I'm aware of positively, which the city has not produced. If you could get me those records immediately through your client, I'd appreciate it well, counselor. Did you do any internet searches on me, Detective Rivera?
Yes.
You did. So, and that was part of your investigation on me, correct?
Yeah, correct.
And now, if you did searches on the internet about me, there will be metadata and search strings.
Objection to form.
I don't even need him to answer the question. I know this. Mr. Zeskind, this is now a fourth set of records that we've established exist, which have not been produced to me. If you could have your clients produce those immediately, I would appreciate it. Detective Rivera, were you aware of my position for the federal government and what type of work I did for them when these search terms were provided?
Objection outside the scope of the order.
Detective Rivera, were you made aware of the nature of the files you received? Let me be more specific. Were you ever made aware that I had used the document you were giving while examining a patent application for the United States military?
Objection outside the scope of the order.
No, it's not. If he was made aware, there could be a record of it. I'm looking to see if there's a record. You can answer the question, Detective.
Not aware.
You are not aware. Detective Rivera, do you have any clearances to work with or possess confidential, secret, or classified federal government documents?
Objection, outside the scope of the order.
Would you care to answer just yes or no? real
He's not
quick for
answering
us?
that one.
Do you believe you would have been provided this document had you merely sent a FOIA in on me and not told the special agent that I was under a criminal investigation?
Objection to form. You didn't specify what document you're referring to outside the scope of the order. He's not answering that one.
Detective Rivera, is it normal practice after you send a letter such as this one, i.e. proclaiming the presence of a criminal investigation and submitting an official FOIA request, and then receiving this type of information in return, to not file a report?
Objection, outside the scope of the order.
Okay, let me rephrase this. Did you file a report based on what Special Agent 7 gave you?
No,
Okay. You previously stated that you reported directly to Chief Roll in these matters. Did the Chief instruct or authorize you and Detective Meade to forego a written report in this case?
Objection, outside the scope of the order. Also mischaracterizes prior testimony, but he won't be answering that question.
Are you saying I mischaracterized that he previously stated that he reported directly to Chief Roll?
You said he reported directly to Chief Roll on these matters,
Okay.
which
I'm sorry.
is
Let me
not what he
rephrase it.
testified to.
You previously stated that you reported directly to Chief Roll. Did Chief Roll instruct or authorize you and or Detective Meade to forego a written report in this case? And if he did such, would there be a public record responsive to that?
Objection, outside the scope of the order, with the exception of the part of the question that asks whether or not there's a record responsive to his request.
So did Chief Roll instruct you or Detective Meade not to write a written report?
Objection, outside the scope of the order. He's not answering them.
If he did, it's relevant to whether there's additional responsive documents. So you can answer the question, Detective.
Objection, that question is outside the scope of the order. It's not limited to the timing of the city's responses or whether additional records exist. He's not answering that question.
Was Chief Roll aware of this investigation?
Objection, outside the scope of the order. He's not answering that question.
Did you give Chief Roll copies of any of the documents from your investigation?
Objection, outside the
No,
scope.
it's not outside. If he handed off documents, it's a public record. That's absolutely responsive to my request. You can answer the question, Detective. Did you give or receive Chief Roll any documents, records, whether electronically, written in paper, or otherwise, between you and Chief Roll related to your investigation on me?
Objection, outside the scope of the order.
no,
No. Did you communicate with Chief Roll electronically or otherwise about this investigation?
don't recall.
Do you know how Chief Roll would have had a copy of this investigation if it was only kept in your office?
Object to form, and also objection outside the scope of the order.
No, it's not outside the scope of the order.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yes. Did you communicate with Chief Roll about this investigation?
Objection outside the scope
No, it's not, sir.
of the order.
Stop coaching my witness, please.
Not coaching the witness.
Yes, you are coaching the witness. Sir, I understand what your order is after you sent me language which I objected to, and then you sent me language which I agreed to, and then you sent the judge a letter where you falsely claimed that we didn't agree when we did agree to the language. I understand how you're trying to improperly narrow my depositions, and even though you got away with that, I'll still stick to that and hold to that. But this is absolutely responsive to if there's any records left that have not been produced. So it is inside the order, sir. So again, Detective Rivera, did you have any communications with Chief Roll related to your investigation into me?
Objection outside the scope of the order. You asked him already if there were electronic communications. I think he said he didn't recall. This is broader than that. and that's outside the scope of the order.
Was George Gretzis ever made aware of this investigation to your knowledge?
Objection, outside the scope of the order.
No, it's not.
He's not answering this one. It's outside the scope of the order.
I'm trying to determine if there's other records that haven't been responsive. If he doesn't answer the questions today, he's going to answer them on the second in front of the judge. And the judge is obviously, you can tell your witness this, is not going to be very happy with his refusal to answer. About as happy as he was with your behavior, Mr. Zeskind. So, was George Gretzis, to your knowledge, ever made aware of this, or did you make George Gretzis aware of this?
Objection, outside the scope of the order. He's not answering it.
Did you communicate with George Gretzis about this investigation?
Objection, outside the scope of the order. He's not answering that.
Did George Gretzis ever send you any message or documents asking you to investigate me?
Objection, outside the scope of the order.
No, it's not. If you send him an email telling him to investigate me as part of the investigation. Did you take some drugs today, Mr. Zeskind?
Listen, I'll make it easy. Certify the question.
Okay, you can explain it to the judge. That's on you. Do you know how Gretzis got copies of records related to this investigation?
Objection, outside the scope of the order.
Did you give George Gretzis copies of this investigation?
Objection, outside the scope of the order.
No, it's not. If you gave him copies of the investigation, it's a record. Mr. Zeskind, you're a public records expert. You know what a public record is, right? Do I need to give you the definition? Detective Rivera, did you ever give any documents related to your investigation on me to George Gretzis?
Objection, outside the scope of the order.
Did you email a copy of anything to George Gretzis?
Don't recall.
Did you text message anything to George Gretzis?
Objection to form.
Don't recall.
Did George Gretzis email or text anything to you?
I don't recall.
And so do you have no idea how George Gretzis got copies of your report?
Objection to form.
No.
Okay. Was this report kept off the RMS system to keep it hidden from public?
Object to form and objection outside the scope of the order. Not answering.
Is there any record that would show who assigned you to do this investigation?
No.
From reading the correspondence with Special Agent 7, it's clear that he's under the impression that there was an open criminal investigation. In fact, he sent you repeated follow-up correspondence requesting the status of the criminal investigation. To your knowledge, were there any documents or correspondence sent clarifying the nature and status of the criminal charges against me?
Object to form.
Don't recall.
Did you ever make Special Agent 7 aware that all criminal charges have been dismissed against me?
I don't recall.
Do you recall Special Agent 7 repeatedly asking you the status of the arrest?
No, I don't recall.
Okay. It's clear that the communication chain through email alone is broken. Did you ever communicate with Special Agent 7 other than through email? This would include phone, text, IM, Facebook.
No, I don't recall.
Detective Rivera, are you aware that anyone who makes a materially false, fictitious, or fraudulent statement or misrepresentation, verbally or in writing, to a federal law enforcement agent commits a felony crime under 18 U.S.C. 1001?
Yes, I'm aware.
Okay. Thank you for your time, sir. I have no further questions.
Bill Reed.
You're welcome.